kitchen.
Yeah.
And poured it in there, just to see what happened. And came back about an hour later, sure enough, there's a layer of ground glass in the bottom. And somehow or other, they'd opened it up and put ground glass in, and it was not good for you.
That is some Vietnamese working on the base or something like that?
Well, no, the black market was off base.
Oh, okay.
Downtown Saigon, so it
probably
was VC or
Viet
NBA.
Cong had got some glass in the bottom of those.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, and this is just one of the pictures of one of the girls you'd see around there.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
And where were you in Vietnam?
Okay.
What part of the country?
Let me get. I was stationed. My battalion headquarters was at Camp de Beau, which was an old French fort.
Yeah.
Outside Saigon.
Okay.
We were pretty close to Tostut Air Force Base.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And then I primarily worked in what they call CDEC, Combined Document Exploitation Center. This is where they brought in captured documents and you translate them. And CICV, CICV, Combined Intelligence Center of Vietnam, which is where you interrogated people and you went out on trips and stuff like that. So I worked in both places.
Okay.
And,
wow. So close to Saigon. Did you go into town?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, CDEC and CICV were just kind of across the street from each other.
Okay.
And then we had the 3rd Army Hospital about 2 or 3 blocks away. And so we'd walk there for lunch most of the time.
This is 1972.
1972.
Yeah. Saigon pretty quiet at that time?
Yes and no. Most of the time, yes. Now, one of my duties was as a courier, and when we didn't have, now they have what they call zipper computers, send classified material over.
Yeah.
Oh, of course, laptops and you know, that was
that
was science fiction.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so but they still had to disseminate documents, and I worked in MI, and so we classified documents, and so that was one of my jobs, was to go to all the different places around Saigon and fire bases and give them classified documents and pick up classified documents. And so one time I was driving a Jeep, and you know, Jeeps are pretty open.
Right, yeah.
Okay. And most of the time you drive with the windshield down too, because you're not going that fast. You're lucky if you're going 40 miles an hour in Saigon with all the traffic.
Right,
unbelievable.
Yeah.
And so I picked up a sergeant. He was wanting to go someplace. So we were driving downtown Saigon, probably going back to one of the headquarters, because we were real close to the hospital, 3rd Army Hospital. And they had a couple of guys with motorcycles. You know, it was crazy.
Sure.
And anyway, they drove up beside us, and one guy got a great big dart, looked kind of like a lawn dart, and threw it and hit the sergeant right in his chest. And he had this old dart sticking out. I laughed my rear off. It just looked so.
At the time?
Yeah, just.
He just got a dart sticking.
Yeah, I got a dart sticking out of it, and so I drove into the 3rd Army Hospital. It was only about.
Oh, you're on your way to the hospital. So
well, yeah. Well, we had to go by the hospital to go back.
Yeah.
And so it was.
Did he get a Purple Heart for that?
Oh, I'm sure he did. I'm sure he did.
So just some VC guy or somebody sympathetic to the VC?
Yeah, it was VC. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was VC.
They're just all over, aren't they?
Yeah.
That's something else.
And this could have got in trouble if I'd got caught taking a picture of that.
Oh.
That's Air America. Are you familiar with Air America?
Not really, no.
That was the Central Intelligence Agency's private airline.
Oh, is that right? Are you allowed to
Oh,
be saying this right now? Okay.
Yeah, all that's, anything I know about that, Air America's way.
So if I was recording this in 1972, it'd be a problem, but it's okay now.
Yeah, probably back then they wouldn't want you talking about it.
Sure. All right. So that's the CIA's, Air America's the CIA's
private airline.
Private airline. But what is the script on the side here?
That was Vietnamese.
Yeah, okay. I see. Oh, right, okay. All right.
And then these, This is just one of the larger Buddhist temples around Saigon.
Yeah.
I went to once.
All these kids, wow.
Yeah, here's some more. Yeah, and they were open to the public and everything, you know.
Sure. Now, you wouldn't go into Saigon alone, right? You'd always have a buddy.
Well, it all depends.
Yeah.
If we were off duty, yeah, you always went with 2 or 3 other guys. Just
And armed as well?
they wouldn't let you.
Really?
They wouldn't let you.
Who's the they, the government of South Vietnam or the?
No, the American government. They were afraid of some GI going nuts and shooting a bunch of people. And the Army was scared to death of bad headlines. They were scared to death of bad headlines.
At that time, huh?
At that time.
Right, because at that time, that's Vietnamization time, right? That's handing the war over to...
Vietnam Hoa is Vietnamese for Vietnamization. Vietnam Hoa.
Yeah. So the Americans need to keep a low profile. Is that kind of the idea?
Well, not really. Basically, we were leaving the country.
Right.
And so we were turning everything over to the Vietnamese, and we were trying to train them, and sometimes you got some that were trainable and you got some that weren't. And
did you, after your tour in Vietnam, you were there, was it 10 months total?
yeah, about, yeah.
At the end of your 10 months, were you confident that the South Vietnamese would be able to do the job?
No, if somebody bet me money, I'd bet they're going to go down.
Yeah. Yeah. Why?
Because now you had some really dedicated South Vietnamese that hated the North Vietnamese because the Viet Minh, which preceded, see, at one time Vietnam was all one country.
Yeah.
And then the UN divided the country, and they were going to vote in 1954 on whether they're going to be democratic or communist.
Right.
Well, the United States and South Vietnam said, we ain't going to vote because you guys are going to fix the ballot box, and it doesn't matter what the real vote is, you're going to be communist. So we ain't going to vote. And so for about a year, families could freely go back and forth between North and South Vietnam and say, you want to live in the North or you want to live in the South? And there was a big cultural difference between North and South. It's like talking to a country redneck in Alabama versus a Boston aristocrat. Yeah. And most of the Vietnamese, even the Christian Vietnamese in the South, they still culturally are very much Buddhist. And Buddhist religions are very, what I see, very wishy-washy. Mm-hmm. It doesn't demand that you stand up and take a stand and decry you're a Buddhist or die, you know. They just go with the flow. Basically, if it happens, it's because it was decreed to happen, so don't worry about it, you know.
It's just the order of things.
Yeah, and so a lot of these, and then there were a lot of people after they find out what the North Vietnamese were doing, they fled to the South. So they lost a lot of family members and everything. Mm-hmm. And if they worked with the French and supported the French after World War II, when the Viet Minh threw the French out, they were treated, let's say, very badly.
What was you mentioned intelligence, what was your actual job in the...
Well, now that was interesting. Okay, you interviewed Dan Dover.
Yeah.
Okay, he worked for the Army Security Agency. Okay.
Yeah.
I worked for the Army Security Agency too. I was trained as a Vietnamese linguist and as a cryptologist.
Yeah, okay.
And as a radio intercept operator. Okay, Dan was what we call a diddy-bop operator.
Oh, diddy-bop.
Yeah, diddy-bop, you listen to Morse code on radio.
Yeah.
And you translate the Morse code. Okay, so we listened to Vietnamese, which was mostly coded messages. And then we would take it down, and then, just like a crypto quote, try to figure out what it did. Well, that's all well and good. Yeah. Except, oh man, it gave me migraine headaches. I did not want to do that. And so when we got to Vietnam, when I flew into Vietnam, we got off at Tan Son Nhut Air Force Base, and it ushered everybody into this huge hangar. And the first thing they said was, okay, everybody with the Army Security Agency, come over here. I thought, I really don't want to do that. So I didn't. And so they put you in what they call a replacement company. And they throw you in some barracks and figure out, okay, you're going to go here and you're going to go here. Well, okay, here they had me as a Vietnamese linguist with a top secret, no need to know
Clearance?
Security clearance.
Yeah.
And so military intelligence grabbed me up because they could always use another linguist
Sure.
with security clearance.
Yeah.
So military intelligence grabbed me up, but I didn't fit into any of their Pacific slots, which ended up being good because this way I got to do a whole bunch of different stuff rather than just have to do this the rest of my, because
Yeah.
if they'd put me at CDEC where you just translated books, that would have bored me to death.
Sure.
And so I got to see a lot of the countryside, and like I said, I had got other duties like a courier, because you had to have security clearance to be a courier because you were carrying top secret classified information.
Yeah.
And so it couldn't be a higher grade than you had.
Right, yeah.
And so,
Wow.
I was pretty lucky. I got to do a lot of different things, and I stood down 4 companies when, like I said, they were going down, and I would work for the 45th Military Intelligence Company most of the time. But even that, the last few months, they sent it back or disbanded it. And then they said, no, we need you. So they put me in another company. And that company would disband. They said, no, we need you. So they put me in another company. I forget the last 3 or 4 companies I was in.
Wow.
But administratively.
Yeah.
But
So you're a courier, you're doing some translating.
right.
Are you're doing interception of messages as well? And
No, I didn't really have to do that, thank goodness. 'Cause
Okay.
that
Yeah,
got
that's
pretty
what you-
boring too.
that's what you wanted to avoid.
Yeah, now the Army Security Agency, they did that. Now, after they would capture them and they would translate them, and if they, most of the time they would, decrypt them, then the military intelligence would get that information.
Okay.
And then our analysts or whatever, they'd say, oh, look at this, look at this, look at this.
Yeah.
And sometimes they were good and sometimes they weren't, because I went over there in March of '72, a couple of weeks before Easter. And Easter Sunday,
Yeah.
North Vietnam invaded with about 200,000. Now, that's a rough figure.
Yeah.
Around 200,000,
Yeah.
including armor and artillery. Their artillery were outdueling our artillery.
This is the Easter offensive. you're
This was
talking
the
about.
Easter offensive. And nobody, and we expected a kind of attack, but we didn't expect what we got.
Wow.
And nobody expected any armor at all. See, we had all these listening devices up and down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And now the Ho Chi Minh Trail wasn't one trail. It was
Right.
24 different trails.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we had these listening devices everywhere. And they couldn't pick up what people were talking, but they could pick up traffic, vibrations. Never heard one armor vehicle coming down from North Vietnam.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so eventually we ended up capturing some of them and interrogating them. And what we found out was they dismantled the tanks in North Vietnam, took them by foot, pieces, into Cambodia, just west of South Vietnam, and reassembled them.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to give them credit, right?
Oh, man, let me
Right.
clue you. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
dedicated little suckers, yeah.
See, so let me ask you this, because it comes up a lot, because a few minutes ago you said you didn't have any confidence the South Vietnamese would be able to stand up.
Right.
But the North Vietnamese are doing what you just described. I mean, this incredible perseverance. I mean, did it ever...
But remember cultural differences?
Yeah, so talk
Okay,
about
North
that. Yeah.
Vietnamese were really more gun-ho, industrious people. The South Vietnamese were more laid back, hey man, how's it going?
Do you think that's because in the South, they just got used to the Americans being there, and they always assumed the Americans...
No,
did
because
work?
the Americans didn't get there till the late 50s, really. I mean, we
Right.
had a presence there
Yeah.
after Korea, But as far as being an actual influence, we weren't an actual influence in South Vietnam until the French had completely left.
Yeah.
And that was late 50s.
Yeah. So you just think that there was just a cultural difference between North and South, and one of the differences was just the North just had a more of a go-getter
Right.
kind of thing.
Right.
Wow, that's interesting. So, I mean, tell me what you remember. You've described the Easter Offensive. I mean, I was in Quang Tri, of course, where they had a big fight there in Quang Tri, way up north by the by the DMZ. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know you were in Vietnam.
Yeah, third time back in January.
Oh,
I was up in Quang Tri.
But I mean, you weren't in Vietnam during the activities.
Oh, no,
Okay,
I was
okay,
like 4 years
yeah.
old.
Okay, yeah, okay.
But recently I visited Quang
Okay,
Tri
right.
and still saw some of the area that had been destroyed. But I mean, what are your actual memories of, since you were there, memories of the Easter Offensive?
Panic.
Yeah,
Okay, now I was on a frontline grunt troop.
yeah,
I was back in the military intelligence where we gathered information. And on Easter Sunday, this all broke at once. I mean, they came
Yeah.
through the DMZ, they came in from Cambodia, they came in from Laos, all at the same time.
wow.
And so
Almost like the Tet Offensive, you think? I mean,
it was much worse than the Tet Offensive.
Yeah.
See, the Tet Offensive was actually set up by the North Vietnamese to get rid of the Viet Cong. The Viet Cong were not necessarily pro-communist unite the countries. The Viet Cong were against the South Vietnamese government. And the NVA could only control so much of the VC. And so the Tet Offensive was basically all VC. And we eradicated
they
them.
got devastated.
They were eradicated, which is what the North Vietnamese wanted. And Walter Cronkite saying, and this will go down in defeat.
Yeah, yeah.
But he didn't look at it realistically, and that we got rid of the VC in '68.
Yeah, militarily it was a huge defeat for the VC. Yeah. So, panic then. So what do you remember? I mean...
Okay,
yeah,
well,
about
I'd
that.
say panic. Now, everybody didn't go running, screaming, you know.
Right, yeah.
They said, what the hell's going on?
Yeah.
And then the general officers were trying to blame each other, and I was a grunt, so I was just trying to figure out what the hell, and they were coming through big time.
Yeah.
And we didn't know, for 3 months, we didn't know whether we were going to hold the country or not.
And did you, I mean, were you thinking that you may actually have to take on a combat role? Was that ever?
Well, I did.
You did?
Yeah, different times, but no, when it was obvious what was going on, I got me a little rucksack and I made it with a compass and canned food and everything else, and I figured out where east was, and I was going to go to the ocean and hopefully get picked up by the Navy, because if we fell, there wasn't going to be any.
Yeah.
I mean, we were the last resources. There was nobody after us.
So, I mean, when I think of the Easter Offensive, I think mainly of, Quang Tri and that area up in
highlands,
I-4.
yeah.
But was Saigon threatened also during
Oh,
the Easter
yeah,
Offensive?
yeah. What was really exciting, a town called An Loc, about 60 miles west of Saigon. And this shows how stupid the North Vietnamese were. An Loc, probably town half the size of Siloam Springs.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty good, big town in the country back then. I mean,
Sure.
Saigon was huge, Wade was huge.
Right.
But most little towns were little. Okay, but An Loc was fairly good size. And so the North Vietnamese came rolling down the highway with their tanks and their artillery and their everything. And they'd met a few small villages from Cambodia and just ran them over. Well, in An Loc, okay, this show you how dedicated they were. About, I'd say about a dozen Americans and probably 3 or 4 companies of South Vietnamese soldiers were in An Loc. And here they had tens of thousands of North Vietnamese with artillery and tanks coming towards them.
Wow.
They didn't get in.
Wow.
The Anlock is under siege the longest time after World War II of any other town in country. It was under siege for about 6 months.
Really?
And,
Wow.
and couldn't get in, couldn't get out.
Wow.
And see, okay, so I think his name was General Ming, M-I-N-H. He was supposed to be the Caesar of the North Vietnamese generals, and he knew everything. Well, oddly enough, he built his war plans on what Julius Caesar would have done. And so when he came to Anlock, he was going to overwhelm it. Now, anybody in the right sense just would have left a battalion there to keep Anlock under control and gone around it, right to Saigon. Because there was nothing between Anlock and Saigon. That was it.
Yeah.
Well, okay, of course we started bombing them. We started sending in parachute loads of munitions and food, and about half of it got to the enemy and half of it got in town. But that showed what could happen, and I think we lost a couple of Americans, we lost several Vietnamese, but the town held. It never did fall.
Wow.
Now I was in the what do they call it when they break a siege? Anyway, I was in the we came in helicopters. I actually did it twice. Okay, we came in helicopters, and the general, whichever general it was, in charge, I forget his name. Anyway, he was going to liberate the city. That's what I was trying to word, liberate. He was going to liberate the city. So he had orders. His helicopter was going to be the first one down. His foot was going to be the first on the ground. And then they were going to, him and his staff were going to go in, and of course everybody else in their helicopters would come in right behind him. And so, sure enough, his helicopter got down, and he stepped out, and all his aides got stepped out. Then they started getting mortar. Well, the helicopter took the hell off, and his men ran like hell, except this guy, he watched Patton one too many times.
Wow.
He just started marching down there. Mortar blew his ass away.
Wow. Did you see that?
Oh, yeah. And we all just laughed our asses off. Who the hell marches down a tarmac when you're getting mortared? You know, you don't do that. You run like hell, or you get under cover, one or the other. And so we came in the next day. And the next day we actually did land, and everybody got off when we went into the city. Now the only time I cried was that time. Because we got in and everything, and like I said, I spoke Vietnamese, and I was just one of the many grunts, American grunts. And what we were doing, now I say they never took the city. They took parts of the city back and forth, but they never took the whole town.
Yeah.
And so we were going through the city, building by building, searching for the enemy. And we'd start either at the first floor or basement and work our way up. And most of the businesses are houses. They were only 2, maybe 3 stories. So, you know, we weren't talking about anything big.
Right, yeah.
And so we went to this one and started at the basement. When we got down the basement, and we heard some noise. And so I called out in Vietnamese. If they were there, they needed to come out or we were going to kill them. So 2 little girls came out, one about 11, and then her sister about 8. And they came out, and they had lived on sewer water and rats and cockroaches for about 3 months. The NVA had come in, and that was an apartment building that their parents rented, and the Vietnamese had raped her mother, killed her mother and father, and her and her little sister ran down the basement, managed to escape the North Vietnamese, and they lived there for about 3 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So, did the guys you're with, did did you get those girls to a hospital or something, or what?
Yeah, we set up a refugee center for the Vietnamese, and so we sent them to the refugee center where they were fed and clothed, and after that, I don't know what happened to them. They're Vietnamese, so the Vietnamese government took care of them, hopefully.
So
And
now they would be in their mid-50s, I guess. They'd be in their 50s now.
Yeah, they would be. They
Yeah.
would be.
Be in their 50s.
I hadn't even thought about that till now. I just don't think of it as
Think of those little girls.
little girls.
Wow. So, when this was going down, then you actually were in a combat role then, or
Well,
advisor
okay, what
role,
they
or-
did, okay, have you ever heard of the Phoenix program?
Yeah, talk a little bit about that.
Okay, the Phoenix program, nobody knows for sure, because, well, until they open the papers, nobody ever will know, but it's projected somewhere between 20 and 40,000 Vietnamese were killed over the Phoenix program. The Phoenix program was to set out and seek North Vietnamese leaders who were South Vietnamese citizens,
Yeah.
or assassinate traitors, Vietnamese traitors,
Traitors to the government of South
to
Vietnam.
the government of South Vietnam.
Yeah.
And South Vietnam did this a lot, and the American government got a great deal on it. And a lot of times you didn't trust the South Vietnamese, and especially their linguists. So this is where I came in.
Yeah.
So they would use me as a linguist. And so I had some interesting tales about the Phoenix program.
They would use you, how would they use you to?
Okay,
in
the first
Phoenix
time I
program?
went out on the Phoenix program, I didn't even know what it was called at that time.
Yeah.
If a group needed me, they just sent for me. So I went out several times to different groups. That's the first and only time I saw them.
Yeah.
So I went out with this one group. They were American group, and they were designated to capture a North Vietnamese tax officer, because the North Vietnamese taxed the South Vietnamese.
Right, yeah.
And so we were commissioned to capture him, and they said, oh, we know where he is and everything. So that's fine. So they sent us in helicopters, and we landed a couple of clicks away where they wouldn't hear us, and we marched in.
Yeah.
And the jungle, and surrounded, it was a little village, wooden hamlets, thatch roofs, everything you think of Vietnamese village, that was Vietnamese village.
Yeah.
And so we marched in, and fortunately it didn't have, it was what we call a communist village, because people there were friendly to the communists. And that's where the tax collector was staying, they said. And so, so we marched in. Well, luckily, the communists, you could not be communist enough. And a lot of times they would take their people and they would have all-night training sessions on how good communism was and how it functioned. And this was quite common. And sometimes they would berate people. Somebody didn't fill his rice supply that day. And so everybody in the village would berate that person for 5 or 10 minutes each on
For not being sufficiently
for not being
loyal to
sufficient,
the cause.
yeah,
or whatever.
right.
Yeah.
And so we were lucky, they'd done that the night before, and everybody was just sleeping in. Didn't have any guards up or anybody, so we just went in the village. And then as soon as some of the guys woke up and realized we were in the village, well, then the shooting started. Well, I'll tell you, I don't care where you are in a bamboo village, those bamboo do not stop bullets. And so that was my first experience with live fire exercise.
Wow.
So I was being pretty dang careful. And so
Now, did you engage in the firefight yourself, or what was your response to the?
my mission was to capture the tax commissioner and interrogate him, make sure we got the right guy. Those were my orders.
Yeah.
My orders were not to play John Wayne.
Yeah.
And like I said, this is the first live fire exercise I was in. So I was pretty, I was a newbie, and everybody knew it. And they knew I was a newbie, and they knew I wasn't supposed to go in and be John Wayne. So
Yeah.
everything was fine. I stayed low, and I didn't get up front. but things were happening all the way around me. And then we captured the women and the children and the men, and we separated them, and then I was interrogating some of the men, trying to find out where the tax commissioner were, and they weren't giving them up. Said, no, we don't know who you're talking about and that kind of stuff. So then I went over to the women, and I just walked around and didn't ask anybody anything and just listened, because they weren't aware I spoke Vietnamese. It was unusual for an American to be fluent in Vietnamese.
Yeah, yeah.
And so they were talking around, and I said, okay, Captain, I know where he is. I said, where the hell is he? I said, well, and one thing I was always, now I'm a pretty good shot with a rifle, really am. But most of the time over there, if you actually get in action, you're less than 50 feet away from the other person. Mm. And so I carried an M79 grenade launcher when I could, except it didn't have a grenade in it. It had double-aught buck. So you're talking like a 2-gauge shotgun with double-aught buck.
Yeah.
And short enough, it was like a blunderbuss. So I went over to the corral where they kept a water buffalo. Now, water buffalo in Vietnam hated Americans. They hated Americans.
I've heard that.
And
yeah.
I don't know why, but they just hated Americans. We smelled differently or walked differently or talked. Anyway, it was all over the country. Damn water buffalo hated Americans. And so some people had shot water buffalo. Well, that's a big no-no, because then the military had to pay for the water buffalo and all kinds of stuff. And it wasn't unusual to get busted in rank, get armed
for shooting a water buffalo.
For shooting a water buffalo. So I went over to the corral, and this water buffalo lowered his head and came right at me. And I waited till it was about 40 feet away, and I emptied that M79 grenade launcher right into his skull, and it went down. And so, man, the captain just came in and glued, what the hell did you do? What the hell did you do? What the hell did you do? You know, now I'm going to get in trouble. And, you know, I said, no, you don't understand, Captain. And he said, I know where the tax commissioner is. And he said, I don't see any damn tax commissioner. I said, you get those Vietnamese to move that pile of dung from there to there. Why the hell are you going to do that? I said, take my word for it. And so he didn't like it. I was just a corporal at that time. He was a captain. And so, but hell, he didn't have anything else to do, so he made the guys move the pile of dung, and under the dung was a spider hole, and that's where the tax commissioner was hiding.
And you found him?
And I found him because the women were talking about him, and I'd overheard the women talking about him.
Wow, wow.
And so man, the captain was sure glad to find the tax commissioner.
Wow.
And we delivered him alive. We didn't assassinate him.
did.
We delivered him alive.
Wow. So that was, did you do other things with the Phoenix program, or is that?
Oh, yeah, that was my first one.
That was your first one?
Yeah, that was the first one I went on.
What, just kind of tick off some of the other missions you had with the Phoenix program?
Well, we primarily wanted to capture what we thought were high-ranking officers or tax commissioners or something like that, or in the Communist Party, not the NVA military, in the Communist Party. Let's see, what...
in South Vietnam, yeah.
Yeah, even the military, even the North Vietnamese military, they had a communist commissioner, and they told the military colonel what to do. You know, maybe it would have been better to divide up the forces into 3 and attack the deal. Well, if the communist commissioner thought it was better to just everybody charge at the same time, that's what they did, you know. Mm. Or if the troops thought they were too tired to fight, the commissioner said we march another 20 miles, they either marched another 20 miles or they got shot, one or the other. Mm. And so we were looking for those guys. Is what we were primarily looking for, and we captured some and ended up killing a lot of them because they didn't want to cooperate.
There'd be resistance, and then there'd be a firefight or something.
Right, you'd be a firefight, and then you then you do what you got to do.
Yeah, wow, wow. So you were there very late, and you said that, you know, after your 10 months, you didn't have any confidence the South Vietnamese would be able to stand on their own. How about when you got there at the beginning? I mean, how did you feel about the mission when you got there?
Man, was I naive? Oh, man. See, I thought, when I was in the Boy Scouts one year, I worked with a South Korean scoutmaster from South Korea. And man, he hated North Koreans, and he was glad for America and everything. And I thought, oh, that's what the South Vietnamese would be like. South Vietnamese hated our guts.
Really?
Really.
Wow.
And one time, okay.
Do you think that was kind of the spoiled, I don't know,
Ugly
it's going to
American?
sound terrible, but no, but kind of the spoiled thing that they've gotten so used to all this American money and American
Well,
help
that's why
they don't appreciate it?
we were leaving, and they hated us for leaving.
Okay.
Because they knew
Yeah.
good times are going to go. Yeah.
Oh, I've had Vietnamese tell me that they still look back on that time as, you know, the time of let the good times roll. When
Well,
the
yeah,
Americans
and
were
yeah,
there.
good times did roll, because Americans, we had cash, and we had
Yeah.
export, and we had all kinds of good stuff, and yeah, good times were rolling.
So how long did it take you after you arrived in South Vietnam to realize that it wasn't going to be all lovey-dovey with the South
Okay.
Vietnamese?
When I was in this replacement company, and then military intelligence grabbed me. Okay, they took me to their orderly room, which was where the captain and first sergeant and clerk were and everything. They didn't really know what to do with me because my MOS didn't fit in any of their MOSs.
Yeah.
So they didn't really know what to do with me. But it got to be where it was payday. And so back then, everybody got paid in cash every month. And so, well, we had MPCs, military pay currency. We didn't have
Right.
green dollars.
Yeah.
We had funny money. It looked like, kind of like Monopoly money.
Yeah.
A little more ornate. But anyway, we call it funny money, MPC. And so the executive officer was pay officer. So we went down and we took everybody's name down and how much they got paid, and we put it in, we made out the cash and put it in envelopes, and then we were going to go out and drive the next day to the C deck and Sick V and all the other places our guys were and give them their cash.
Yeah.
Okay, so we went to Sick V. Very first stop, Sick V, still Central Intelligence Center, Vietnam. This is where the interrogation center was. Okay, and we didn't want to, the lieutenant didn't want to drive around in a Jeep because get Jeep hijacked or roll over or something real easy.
Yeah.
So we took a freaking bus. I mean, a school bus that was painted green. We took a bus. And he said, you know how to drive? I said, yeah, I've driven school buses. So, Saigon traffic, well, that's something else. Anyway, we made it to Sick V. And we parked outside the gates and we went in. And there were no Americans there, just all South Vietnamese. And we're Americans, so they let us in. And then they said, you have to stay here. Who do you want? I said, Sergeant, whoever. And Lieutenant didn't speak Vietnamese, and I did, so I was talking to him. I made the biggest damn mistake of my life. Well, now that was later when I got married. Anyway, biggest mistake I made over there. And he said, what do you have to see him? And we had a briefcase. It was full of money. I mean, about $250,000 worth of money.
Yeah.
Which was a lot of money back then, especially over there. And I said, it's payday, we came to pay him. Wrong freaking thing to say. First thing the Vietnamese sergeant did was pull his .45 out and point it at me.
Wow.
He said, let me have the briefcase. Well, I had my M16, and I had it cocked back, so I just pressed on that button and went, bolt, slid home. I said, no, I don't think so. And by this time, the lieutenant's eyes were getting big. What the hell's going on? And so that South Vietnamese, he got closer to me, and I got closer to him. And he put his .45 right against my chest, and I was pressing on it for all I was worth. Because most people, I've always been a gun enthusiast. Most people don't realize this, but on an old Colt 45 model 1911, if you press hard enough on the front, the trigger will not pull. It's a safety device. Inadvertent, but it's a safety device. The barrel goes back, and it won't. And I was pressing all I was, and that guy was, and then finally, the lieutenant was going nuts, yelling, and finally an American sergeant who we were supposed to heard him, and he came running out, and he diffused everything. When I was looking down, and that South Vietnamese sergeant's finger was white, pulling that trigger, and he couldn't understand why the hell that pistol hadn't gone off.
Wow.
But,
so he just wanted to steal the money or take the money?
Yeah, well, kill us and steal the money. I mean, he couldn't steal the money without killing us.
Yeah. So this was your wake-up call that it wasn't going to be.
That was my wake-up call. Said, ooh, this is not the way I thought it was going to be.
This is what our ally is.
Yeah.
These are the people we're fighting with.
Right.
Yeah.
I said, ooh.
Jeez.
Yeah, something clicked in my mind real quick. Ooh, yeah, this ain't going to be fun and games. And this is what we call the Freedom Bird.
Oh, yeah.
747.
That's the Freedom Bird.
Call it the Freedom Bird. That's what flew us home.
When that plane got airborne, was there the shout that you sometimes see? The guys like just
No, we didn't shout or anything like that, but we clapped our hands or something, you know, like, oh man, yeah, we're going home.
Yeah.
But there wasn't.
Yeah. Let me go back to you were talking about those two little girls. There are a couple more questions about Vietnam. Let's go back to those little girls, because, you know, if they're still alive, they're in their 50s now.
Yeah.
So there's a good chance they are still alive.
Distinct possibility, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you know, just to put a scenario together, let's say, let's say somehow here in the States or there in Saigon, you know, I was able to bring one or both of them to you. You know, what do you think you'd say to them?
I'd like to know, you know, how they survived the camp and how their lives, if they've had good lives or bad lives since then.
Yeah.
You know, I'd be interested in knowing that.
Yeah.
But probably, of course, you never know. Some people turn out to be, you know, historic figures.
Yeah.
But most likely they just lived out their lives, ordinary civilians, never got rich, probably had families and whatnot.
Yeah, yeah. What do you think young people today, you know, we're actually meeting in a classroom here. Let's say that there are students in the seats behind us. And the question is, what do you think young people today should know about the war in Vietnam? What would you say?
They need to differentiate reality from non-reality. When I got done with Vietnam, they sent me to Fort Carson, Colorado, 4th Military Intelligence Company. And the Air Force Academy, which is pretty close, asked for an interrogator to come up and talk to one of their classes about what was right and what was wrong. Now, I'll be truthful. Americans, I never saw an American violate the Geneva Convention or the UCMJ. That's not to say the Vietnamese didn't, but the Americans, as far as I know, never did.
Yeah.
And
in the world you were in.
Well, I was in interrogation center. So,
oh, right, yeah.
So, you know, if it happened, I think we would have heard about it anyway.
Sure.
So a lot of the stories you hear about Vietnam are stories. And so I went up there and talked to them, and they were, you know, what's moral and what's fit. And so I said, okay, here's the deal. You're walking down town, and you're armed, you got a 45 or a rifle, whatever, and all of a sudden, 100 feet in front of you, here comes this 3-year-old carrying a hand grenade. What do? Oh, well, you tell him to stop. You run the other way. No, you just shoot his ass. That's what you do. You shoot his ass. And then you worry about the implications later. But here's the deal. You're still alive. This is why Chris Kyle's movie, sniper.
That's not American Sniper.
This is why I know it's real. The opening scene, he shoots a little kid. That's how I know it's real.
Because that happened over there.
Yeah, it happened over there.
Those beautiful little kids walking toward you with baskets. You don't know what's in the basket.
Well, yeah, well, something like that, you know, hopefully nothing's in the basket. But if he comes at you with a hand grenade, you know, we had, in between MACV headquarters and the work, you had about a half-mile walk. And most of the time you walked it rather than drove it. It was just easier. And in that half mile, it was still on base. We were still on base, but there were some civilians that lived there in shacks. I don't know why they let them, but they did. And so one time I met this company. At that time when I was over there, SOG had ceased to exist, but they replaced it with a new group. I forget the name of the new group. But anyway, these guys, they are the real deal. And so instead of landing where they're supposed to land, they landed close to us, and so I was walking them over to MACV headquarters. And we went by this one shack, and I'd forgotten all about it because we got used to it. There was a little kid there, about 2 years old. We call him a little terrorist because he'd scare the shit out of you. You know, he'd come screaming out of the shrubbery, just, you know, trying to scare you. And he would. You know, first time he did it, he would. And after that, you realize, you know, there's nothing to it. He's just trying to scare you.
Yeah.
Well, I forgot to tell these guys about him. And so he comes screaming out of the little shrubbery. What, you know, 3 different guys just wiped his ass off right there.
Wow.
Well,
Wow.
hey, they didn't know.
Jeez. Is that something you heard about, or were you there?
No, I was there. I was walking. I was with them, walking them. You know, I forgot to tell them about the little terrorist, you know. You know, just something you're used to, so you don't even think about it.
What happened to those guys?
Nothing.
It was just kind of an unfortunate.
Yeah.
And what about the kid? And
Well,
I mean, how did all that?
I'm sure the Army paid his parents off.
Yeah. Jeez. I mean, so this is the world of war, huh?
Yeah.
This might be a stupid question, but I mean, and maybe an unanswerable one. But what's it like to, you know, to carry on with your life? You know, here we are, you know, decades later, carry on with your life, but you've got these memories that not very many people can relate to. You got them in your head, these girls who've been living on sewer water and rats.
Yeah, you're exposed to
kind of
stuff
thing.
most Americans never see or even hear about. And unless somebody has been in combat, I really don't talk to them about my time because I made a mistake of talking to other people. Oh, man, you know, I can't believe you did that. You know, they have no concept. They have absolutely no concept.
Right. Yeah.